I think we're ready to start. So, welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet Housing Committee. My name is Councillor Julian Took, and I'm chair of the committee. This meeting is being streamed live to the Cheltenham Borough Council YouTube channel. So you are on TV. If you ask a question at the meeting, you will be deemed to have consented to be filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for broadcasting and or training purposes. Please note as well that a fire alarm test is not expected, so if the alarm does sound, please make your way to the nearest fire exit. So without more ado, we'll start working through the agenda. So apologies, I think we're all present and correct. We're all here, so that's fantastic, a full house. Declarations of interest. Has anyone got any declarations of interest? Brilliant. Then third item is public and member questions. We haven't received any questions in advance of this meeting. Next item is we're speeding through this. The next item is the minutes of the last meeting. I wasn't at the last meeting, so I'm not going to vote on this, but you should have, well, we've all received them actually. Are you aware of, I'm not aware of any amendments, are you? And I move that members approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of November. Should we all stick our hands up if we approve them? Brilliant. Okay, so all approved. The next item is the Chief Executive's briefing, so over to Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got 3 or 4 updates today because I won't want to necessarily cover the items on the agenda already. I just want to give a bit of an update to the committee, starting with recruitment. So we went out to market with the aim of recruiting a director post that would ultimately oversee the technical and investment and the sort of responsive repairs divisions. That was towards the end of last year. We would have hoped to have made an appointment. Unfortunately, the individual that was offered the post didn't accept. So a little bit of a disappointment, but that means that we will be going back out to market, and we're already engaging with recruiters on that. And we'll bring a further update to a later committee about how we continue to progress that. We see that the recruitment of that senior post is really important over those 2 sorts of divisions around the technical investment and the responsive repairs primarily. Because of that, I just thought it was worth providing a little bit of reassurance to you all in terms of the kind of regulatory position around what we are required to do in terms of having suitable people overseeing the functions of the Housing Committee, and in particular reassure the committee on the role of the duty holder. Now, the duty holder is the person that ensures that we have suitable, responsible people that oversee all of the sort of big 6. So big 6, if I can remember them: gas, electric, fire, water, lifts, and asbestos, plus damp, mould and condensation. So clearly, in terms of the ruthless focus that this committee has clearly set out around safety and compliance, I thought it was important just to provide that reassurance that our duty holder in this instance will continue to be Paul Leo as our interim. Now, Paul has got vast experience in housing, having previously fulfilled the role of housing director. I won't take you through his CV directly, but we believe that he is more than qualified with his experience to fulfill that role, and that's precisely why we brought in the specialist interim support that we did, and that will remain in place until we can have an appropriate transition. So I just thought it was important stating to the committee that that will remain in place and that will fulfil, as far as we're concerned, our responsibility with the regulator of having a suitable duty holder, whilst we continue to ensure that we proceed with the positive recruitment process. Beyond that, and this is a slightly wider subject matter, one of the things that we've been working with our HR colleagues is looking at the opportunity to improve the sort of professional development and the housing management understandings and qualifications right across our business. We think that there is an opportunity for both senior people and people who are more junior in the organisation to start to build their housing management qualifications. And so we will be putting in place people on training courses, including Claire to my right here, to make sure that actually we create more strength in depth in the organisation of people with the right housing qualifications, so we get that strength in depth and that sort of succession plan, if you like. So that's that wider commitment to sort of professional development, which sits beyond the sort of duty holder. And as I said, I think that I really hope that provides a positive opportunity for people within the organisation to develop their skills and qualifications. Beyond that, I'd sort of like to thank colleagues here, the fact that we have had now a couple of meetings of the improvement programme. So that's a fundamental part of our drive to become, make those great strides and improvements against those consumer standards. I've always said that our ambition as housing should be nothing less than being a C1 rated provider. So that improvement programme is absolutely essential to ensure that we move towards that target. So it's pleasing to see that programme has met a couple of times and we're starting to gain a little bit of momentum. One of the good things about that programme is it is giving us that oversight over what's going well and what are the areas that we might need to concentrate on a little bit more. So one of the things that we talked about at the last meeting was the fact that one of the critical pieces of work in terms of our improvement journey is to move through the completion of our condition surveys for all of our properties. I just want to update the committee that we are slightly behind target on where we would want to be in terms of the percentage of properties that we wanted to have surveyed by this point. But we talked about measures around increasing the number of surveyors working with the contractor that we've engaged to deliver those condition surveys. So the target is to try and catch that up as we move through. And so that's something that we're actively engaged on. I can't emphasise from my perspective how important those condition surveys are in getting to the point of the ambition of really understanding our homes well. Because if we don't understand our homes well, we can't then think about taking informed decisions about where we invest, which bathrooms we replace when, which kitchens we replace when, what blocks need prioritise capital investment ahead of others. So that's a really, really important part of our programme. The final thing I'll just talk about is which is probably related to the last item on the agenda, which is there has been a huge amount of activity in the local government space. Within the space of 7 days, the government announced pretty much the biggest planning reforms there have been for many years, an entirely new finance settlement, and then the local government white paper, which proposes significant change to how local government is organised and structured. So the two headlines are the government would like to see every area of England covered by some form of strategic combined authority. So good examples of that exist is the Manchester City region with Andy Burnham. We have the West of England Combined Authority just to our south. They would like to see every authority in England being part of, in an ideal world, their view is that some sort of mayoral regional body that would form a combined authority. But they have also written out to every two-tier area. So Gloucestershire is a two-tier with a county council structure with districts, and they have requested that all two-tier areas present interim proposals for local government reorganisation in the spring, followed by final proposals in either May or autumn. And the reason that's either May or autumn is because it is dependent on whether the county council elections, which are currently scheduled for May, whether they go ahead or not. Because the county council have applied and written to the government to request a delay in the election. So we are due to find out potentially at the end of January about where we stand on that sort of response, but that will have a determination on the sort of journey that we end up on. What does that mean for housing? So let me be absolutely clear that the administration at Cheltenham Borough Council has been absolutely crystal clear that we will continue to focus on delivering our corporate priorities. And a huge corporate priority is that of housing, not just the delivery of more homes, but also to continue to achieve what we set out in terms of our improvement journey around our housing management. So in many respects, although this will be going on in the world out there, we will retain our focus on our improvement plan and the work that we were setting out to you as a committee. The final thing I will say about local government reorganisation, I'm not going to comment on what shape or size local government might end up in Gloucestershire, other than that the government have been very, very clear that county and districts will be replaced with unitary authorities of some form. So bringing together both of those sorts of institutions into a single one. What does that mean in Gloucestershire? Well, it is a fact at the moment that Cheltenham Borough Council and Stroud District Council are the only two authorities within Gloucestershire currently that have actually retained their own housing stock. So what I do think that presents is an opportunity for the future to think about how we can continue to provide excellent homes to our communities. If that means that there is a bigger footprint than the footprint of Cheltenham, then I think that we have the people and the skills to be able to contribute to whatever that looks like in the future. And so I think for housing in particular, I see it genuinely as an opportunity for our housing colleagues who have the potential to look to a future where they might not be as constrained by a Cheltenham boundary. That's very specific to housing, but I think that's worth saying in a very, very specific housing lens. I'll stop there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gareth, very much. Now's the time to ask if you've got any questions. A slight preamble to that. Bear in mind when you're asking questions that no decisions are required, but the committee can make recommendations if needed. So that could easily come out of this discussion. And also those recommendations could include that we take a discussion to further scrutiny to ONS or to the Cabinet and so on. So any questions? Who would like to go first? Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's great that you're planning to do training to improve the experience of staff in terms of the housing sector. I just wondered about the future training of members of this committee. So I know we've done some work with Pennington's to ensure that members of this committee are well informed and very clued up on social housing and social housing sector. So does that extend to members of this committee?
Gareth.
Yes. I think that we're always interested as part of our kind of member development programme, looking at our committees and looking at what I would say this isn't a sort of a top down from us. We think you need to know about this. What I'd like is a positive conversation about what areas you'd like to know more about, and then we can talk together and put that as a part of the programme.
Councillor Lucas.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from that, there is something I think this committee might find very interesting, and that is what happens when we seek to make our homes accessible to people who have particular needs. Within Cheltenham, we have, within our council portfolios, we have an officer who actually works with those who have disabilities. She is someone who goes to see them. She helps to arrange cash. And this is not just for council housing, but for housing right across Cheltenham, right across Cheltenham. So if you're a social landlord tenant, if you have a private home, if you're privately rented, if you're a council tenant, all of those fall within that area. And she is able not only to help tenants and owners to change the way their homes are to make them accessible so they can continue to live in them, but she's also doing a great job on bringing extra cash to them for benefits. And I just wonder, Chair, whether, given what has been said about training, whether this committee would like to have a presentation from her. Her name is Nicola Wyman, and she can come and give the presentation. We can ask her questions and find out exactly what is done, when and how this council is doing things in Cheltenham, yes, but also works with the wider community in the county.
So my personal view is that that's a very good idea. Thank you for suggesting it. I'm seeing nodding heads, so I'm assuming that everyone's in agreement with this. So we can arrange that. I mean, later we are looking at the schedule, the diary for the next few months. So obviously we'll have to rejig it a bit, maybe, but we can definitely look at that.
We can just put on a separate briefing session if you want.
Brilliant. Okay. Councillor Pinniger.
I don't know whether now's the time to ask about the briefing note, but there's some really interesting things in there. We're talking about keeping people in their homes, but we're about 10% of the average number of over 65s still in their homes rather than in care setting, in sort of schemes where they've got care on hand. So in their later life, they've got support. So there's that. I thought it was really interesting. But the other thing was furnished properties. The Springbank Centre has a service where they'll provide pots and pans and those kinds of things. There's a place that provides furniture. We do housing first for people who've got drug dependency or are living on the street. And quite often they go into flats and houses that are completely empty, not even carpets. And apparently, I don't know how they work it out, but for every £1 invested in carpets and furniture, the council could save £11 of additional costs because of problems further down the line. So it'd be really nice if we could have a bit more detail around that. If anyone could find a bit more out.
We can do that.
Okay, that sounds like a good action to me.
Yep.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so it sounds like we're moving over to the next agenda item. So that's the Property Compliance Performance and Stock Condition Project update. Just a reminder of the objective on that. So Mr. Paul Leo will be talking to us, and the objective is to provide the committee with an understanding of our property compliance status and the planned improvements needed to address areas of non-compliance. I think I may have said this before, but this topic sounds dry, But there's probably nothing more important than this, because when we think about Grenfell Tower and the appalling things that happened there, it was because the scrutiny processes didn't work properly and so on. And you are key to that. So really look forward to Paul Leo's presentation to us. And please do scrutinise, because it's really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the report is as written, but it does include the fact that I would update the committee on actions, particularly because of the timescales. You get the report for the end of November, and so what I'll do is where there's changes or significant things, just update you if that's okay. The changes that I just want to bring, and it follows on from your comments, Chair. It's fire risk actions, which was the major issue, which caused us to self-refer, and which we've still got a major focus on, that and stock condition survey, which Gareth has already mentioned. In terms of fire risk assessments, the number of fire risk assessments as of the end of December that were overdue had reduced from 111 to 107, which isn't a big reduction, but it's as we're trying to work through those, but of those, 20 are high risk. 14 of those are due to fire doors that need to be replaced, but need to be manufactured to be replaced. And 6 are due to compartmentation issues, which I think we've discussed before, but I can answer questions on what compartmentation is if required. But where we've got those high-risk ones, they've all got mitigation measures in place to keep the residents safe at the moment till a permanent solution can be put in place. And obviously, we also keep the tenants, the residents of that are affected by that informed. And just following on from that, we're now starting the new process of new fire risk assessments, because these fire risk actions were outstanding from a set of fire risk assessments that were done over a year ago. And one of the problems which caused this issue in the first place is they were all done at once. And because they were all done at once, they all created a load of actions at once, and those actions overwhelmed the service in trying to respond quickly to those. So we'll now have a rolling programme, and if that means some are done earlier, at least it spreads them out. That rolling programme has just started, and as alongside that, what we've also put in place a new process. So whereas the old actions were handled by a team who manually used spreadsheets and followed those up, we now put all those actions on our housing management system early on. And the importance of that means is we can take a snapshot at any time of what's outstanding, and also use some of the power of that system to warn us where actions are in danger of going overdue. But it also makes it much more transparent for the whole service to see what's going on. I know that's quite a lot of detail, but I think it's quite important to keep stressing how we never want to be in that position again. We want to stay on top of the actions as they're identified and respond appropriately depending on their priorities as identified by the assessor. And just following on from that as well, this week we're receiving a specialist consultancy report on 3 external fire risk assessments on 3 blocks. A fire risk assessment would normally be internally done, and it's visual, but when the last set of fire risk assessments were done, there was 3 of our blocks that are over 11 metres high, which actually now is coming under the scrutiny as the regulations come down, where they have old render on the building, and it was felt that render presented a potential fire risk. Now, the reports are only coming through this week, but because they notified us in advance saying, look, we just have a problem with this render, we responded straight away on those. And that response included letting the residents know within days, because the important thing is to make sure they know about the problem, working with the fire service to make sure they know as well that we are concerned about the render from these blocks, and immediately start putting in mitigation measures for the example for those was at least in one of the blocks, people were parking their cars right against the block. There was a hashed area where you're not supposed to park, but to be honest, we had never not enforced that. We immediately started enforcing that and telling residents that's to keep cars away from the building because they possess a risk. We immediately started doing repairs to the render at the bottom, because it's where the render was revealed at the bottom was one of the issues. And we also commissioned, and in fact, as the reports arrived this week, it coincides with us doing work to put newer fire alarm systems in those blocks to make sure that if there was a fire, it would be notified to a central control 24 hours a day, and also to make sure that if there's a fire in any of the individual apartments, the fire alarms would go off across all those homes so people would know to evacuate. And the other thing to say is why 11 metres has only just become part of the regulations, and to offer some comfort, of course, is because there's, the 11 metre, and I think you did cover this in a briefing, the 11 metres is important because the fire brigade can access all that height with their, so if someone was stuck in those buildings, the fire brigade can get them out, and also they stand a better chance of surviving if they jumped out, which we would never want them to do, obviously, but that's again part of that logic. So while the other mitigation we put in place, which continued over Christmas and New Year as well, is we used our teams, our 24-hour response teams, to check on those properties regularly to make sure nothing had created a new fire risk. In one of them, we moved the bins further away from the building. So these are just sensible things to do in liaison with the tenants to say, let's move the bins away just to make sure nothing on the outside of the building might catch fire. And once we've got clearance from the specialists to say, and they're already saying that the render repairs already have reduced the risk. Putting in fire alarms means you don't really need to check on those properties because the fire alarms will do that job. I spent a bit of time on that, Chair, just to show you that we want that culture of something's identified and spotted, we respond straight away, we involve the residents, we involve the experts. And we do what needs to be done, even if it means inconvenience residents who say, but we've got one less car parking space or two less cars because we can't use the whole width of the area. Well, we're sorry, but that's the way it is, and we can't negotiate on those sorts of things. So on fire risks, we're moving in the right direction, but obviously we want to get those high risk and out of date actions complete as well, and then we can take away the mitigation measures. But I hope the example I gave of those 11-storey blocks shows how 11-metre blocks shows how we respond and how we mitigate. We involve residents, and then once things are resolved, we can take that off the action list, Chair. Just moving down, the other things that I would say, the report says I'd update on damp mould and condensation. This is the time of year those cases go up. We have 275 cases that are open as of today, which is an increase from 249, which is on the report in front of the committee tonight, Chair. That is in line with the sort of expectations that when winter comes, we have more cases. We're responding to those cases. One category 1, that's the highest level of risk case, was identified in responding to that, and the tenants were decanted out of their homes to another home on the same day it was identified. We will respond quickly where we find that, so to try and minimise the risk to residents. Others don't need that sort of response. A mould wash and other measures can reduce the immediate impact normally. And just to, Gareth mentioned the stock condition survey running a bit behind. Again, we've got 6 category 1 safety issues identified when we're doing the stock condition surveys. Of those, 2 are related to damp mould and condensation, and that's where the surveyor spots something immediate that needs immediate response. When they do that, they ring that through to us, and we classify it as a category 1, which means it gets an immediate response. Some of those that we reported last time, once we went and looked, we could actually resolve, because we want the surveyors to take a safety first approach, but when we go and investigate, we might actually find it's actually category 2 and it's not as dangerous as they thought, but we'll always respond and they'll always ring that through. And the final thing I just want to say, Chair, and I'm sorry to take the committee's time on this, because I know you may have questions as well, is we did receive a question of how we record repairs, because there's very specific ways we should be recording repairs, and of course we should, because they're part of the TSMs, the tenant satisfaction measures that we have to report centrally, what we've identified is going back to sometimes, certainly before the transfer, that there was an issue with some repairs that were reported that the responsive repairs team could not deal with. A particular example, and most of these are this, is fencing. If we decided to do a fencing repair, the idea was we normally batch them up and send them to a contractor, but we didn't have a contractor on site, so it went to from our responsive repairs teams to our technical and investment team. Not with any ill will, what then the responsive repairs team would do is stop that job, say, right, we've dealt with it because we passed it on. And then it went to the technical investment team, who then was supposed to commission contractors to do that work in time. We should not have shut those repairs off because they were still repairs. We should have kept them open, but we've been shutting them off. We're changing that process now. It does mean, though, that some of our data is inaccurate, but just to reassure members, it does equate to about 0.5% of the repairs we've done. So it's not statistically significant in terms of, it means our data isn't as good as it should be, the accuracy isn't as good as it should be. But again, this is part of a continuous improvement and trying to improve things. And it's, again, not something that we say is material and therefore would need to be identified. But I just wanted to use an example because I know questions have been raised, and it's just, again, us trying to continue on that journey of improvement. Chair, then there may be other questions, but thank you for...
Thank you to you very much. I think you're still... There we go. Yeah, thank you to you very much. Very much appreciate it. Any questions again from everyone else? And again, bear in mind, if we want, we can refer things to ONS or to Cabinet for more scrutiny. So, fire away. Councillor Pinniger, I think, was first.
Hi, Paul. I've got a few questions. I've got a few questions on the 3 blocks. I'd really like to know which ones those are, because I would probably cycle by and have a look.
Yes, the 3 blocks, they've all got 3 different addresses, and I may ask for help on this because I always get confused because although they're close to each other, they all end up in different streets. They're quite close to the Shell station, I think it's fair to say. I'm just looking to Caroline, can you prompt me on the streets they're in? Orchard Way, Greville Road and Arle Road are where the higher blocks are.
Top of P Way.
Right, yes. And by the way, we also contacted all the ward councillors as the same. So if it was in your ward councillors, you would have had a call from us to let you know.
Thank you. And then these are the questions that I had before the meeting. So there was a fire at Bishop's Court, which is in St Mark's. I wanted to know whether that had any outstanding fire risk assessment remedial actions, that block, or whether it was, I think the fire was completely independent of whether or not it had them. I just wondered if there were any.
No, the fire risk assessment was all up to date there. So we went through proper process. Tenants had temporarily accommodated, but also we were very clear that although there were a number of actions to do before it was safe for them to go back, it was all then signed off by our fire risk assessor to say it was safe to go back. So it was compliant beforehand, and it was compliant when people, before people could return. And I think they returned by the 19th of December is the date that we...
And then there were 5 Category 1 issues out of 271 inspections. So by my calculation, that's 2%. These are the ones that you then go and inspect and close off if it's not. It doesn't need to be Category 1, it can be Category 2, which means there's potentially 86 against the whole, across the whole estate, like 4,700 council houses. That's just something I noted. So that's quite a high number of potential Category 1s, I think. So is that something to worry about?
Well, it's something to be very concerned about, but it's actually in a way to be expected, which is why we should do regular stock condition surveys, because this is the time when obviously anyone can report at any time, and we have we expect when people are doing their gas servicing, if they spot anything, but this is when actually surveyors are going around looking at every aspect of the building, and often they will spot things like damp and mould, and we want them to ring those in. So it's probably, to be honest, in my experience, which Gareth referred to, in Tower Hamlets, where it's a much more overcrowded borough with very different levels of stock, we'd expect a lot more of those Category 1s to be reported and have to respond to. It doesn't mean they're all going to result in a decant or anything as dramatic as that, but this is part of good practice to do that. When an expert surveyor goes in, they will spot things others haven't, and they will report them in. So I don't think it's anything exceptional, but I don't want to say we shouldn't worry about it, because every Cat 1 is something we should be worried about, Chair.
Thank you. That's everything.
Thank you, Flo.
Thank you. Within the report, there is an item in relation to obtaining access to properties for electrical investigation and not being able so to do, and therefore having to go through the legal route. Are we still looking at 38 properties for that? And if so, do we have any idea of timescale when that might be completed?
Chair, it is still at 38, I can confirm. It does take time to go through that process. I should also say, though, that in terms, strictly speaking, as of this moment, those are not non-compliant properties, because at the moment the standard is 10 years. Good practice is 5, and 5 will come in. So we're trying to get them all down to 5. So it does not actually at the moment, we still have right to access, we still will go through that access point. But why we're not highlighting it in quite the same way is because we're actually, we could still have, as long as they were within 10 years, we would still be compliant.
Thank you. Ian.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got a few things on this report, starting off with the introduction. Under implications, 1.1, financial, property and asset implications, in terms of the improvement programme, if additional budget is necessary, it will be accommodated by reallocating funds from less critical programmes. But it doesn't actually mention what these less critical programmes are and what might need to be not happening or to be cut back because we need additional funding for the improvement programme. Secondly, 1.5, in terms of the tenancy audits, do we have a timeline for this? Do we know when we expect these to be done and how long it's going to take to do the full tenancy audit? I also was looking under the fire safety and specifically with the replacement of timber fire doors, and I note that it's a 2-month lead time. But does this include the security doors, the timber security doors on the fronts of multi-occupancy blocks of flats? Because a lot of these are not secure, and people are simply able to force the door and gain access to the properties, and this has resulted in not just in antisocial behaviour, but in criminal behaviour. So I'm wondering whether these replacement timber doors include those security doors. The two things, and I'm sorry if I seem to have a bee in my bonnet about capped gas, but it seems that we have more properties than last time with capped gas, now up to 74. And I know, Caroline, that you briefed us before Christmas that every one of those people had been contacted. Have the new properties now been contacted? And do we have any information about how many of these properties have debt on their meters? Because recent experience that I've had, not within Cheltenham, but within another social housing provider, Platform Housing, was that people with debt on their meters could not have their gas supply uncapped until they had settled the debt on the meter. One last thing, under the risk assessment at the end in the appendix, the asbestos register sharing. And I know that this is an ongoing thing, and we've been talking about the systems and whether they're able to hold the asbestos register and how it's communicated through not just to contractors but also to tenants about their own properties. Again, could you just update us on where we are with that information being accessible to tenants? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to check on tenancy audit. I'm just so completely transparent. I'm just checking. Are we finished, or we've got how far?
We're on target and we'll finish by the end of March.
By the end of March, we'll have finished those audits. They're being handled by obviously Caroline's team. That's why I just need to check with that. So in terms of the first question that Ian asked about the less critical, the fact is that we need the stock condition survey to actually lay out then our recommendations for what work will be done in the next year under the capital works. So although there's assumptions and we've got contractors ready, we also have a new decent home standard coming through. And what we know about the new decent home standard, it will not, and it's not been the case for some time, that we do not, to comply with decent homes, have to replace all kitchens after 20 years or bathrooms after 30 years, which was the case with the previous programme. And the very reason for that is because it's clear that what we should be doing is prioritising safety and sorting all those issues out. So when we've got enough stock condition information to work out what we would recommend and how we need to split up that budget, we'll create a programme which will then also need to be consulted with residents and with this committee before it's finally gone through. But because we're lining up the contractors, in the meantime, we will probably do some work on the oldest kitchens or the oldest bathrooms. I can't be specific at the moment. But basically, how many kitchens and how many bathrooms? And those are the sorts of things that, I mean, obviously, if a kitchen is not fit for purpose, we need to replace it, and we should be replacing it. It's cheaper and more, well, it's financially more efficient to do those in blocks rather than do them in responsive repairs. Or in response, because we'll always use a contractor to do that, because contractors who do that all the time are more effective at that. But it might mean that we do less on the programme because we have to do these works first. So those are the balances we need to make, and we're not in a position even to say because, you know, for example, what we learnt with the render on those higher buildings, we have render on lower buildings as well. And that render was put in quite a while ago now, and we need to check its condition, and if its condition's not right, we need to fix it. And it might be that we end up with an external programme to replace rendering, which is probably something we didn't allow for in the next year, and that's going to have affect what we might do inside. So health and safety and you know and risk is always going to be prominent. So I hope that answers that one. Yes, some of these fire doors, the timber doors in particular, yes, should be secure. And if they're not secure, we need to fix them. Where they are waiting for manufacturer, that doesn't mean we just don't have a fire door on there. We have an interim fire door that is a temporary fire door because if we just had a door that was not fit for purpose and would take work within a fire, that would be a very high risk. And if we can't fix it, we'd have to consider whether it's even safe to have residents in that building. So the security is also an issue, and you know, it often is. It needs to be responded to, and even if we're waiting for a new door, we should make sure it's secure in the meantime, as necessary. On the capped gas, yes, we do have a process, and some of those are going to be in debt. And again, I'm looking, because we do provide some support. So I don't know whether it's just helpful for Caroline to comment on that.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. So, yes, we have been in contact with all of those cases. Each and every one of those is individual, and their circumstances, as you expect, are different. I can report to committee we've done some really positive work, Claire, Richard and I, to identify potential funding to support some of those issues. But we need to develop criteria for that, and we've got time allocated to do that next week to make sure we make the best use of that funding and get the best outcomes for those tenants.
And the final point, I think, but I'll be corrected if I've missed any of Ian's comments, is on the asbestos register. So I mean, we're still doing work on this, but I can be absolutely clear: an asbestos register doesn't have to have too much information on it. It just needs to say whether risk exists and and whether a survey is being done. We are going to have that on our core QL housing system. What it won't have, if you then want to look, and this is quite acceptable, if work's going to be done on that property and it says that there is a risk of asbestos, the documents will be ready, will be accessible on our documentation system, which does mean that if someone's doing an emergency responsive repair, they can't see that document. But that's quite normal. That's how things work. We're commissioning new contractors, possibly up to 3 contractors, because although we haven't made the final decision, I can see this is the way it's going to go. It's a bit more detail. We need the contractor who does the surveys. We need the contractor who does the remedial action. They're 2 different contractors, and we may need a 3rd contractor because, again, we have a member of staff going on maternity leave, and one of the things we may do, and this is again to say, if we don't have a qualified responsible person, and we, by the way, we do have a qualified responsible person, but we may need him to do other things to get to. This is one of those things you might be able to contract out to a consultancy who do a sort of audit on how we're doing it to make sure. And that's the same as we do with gas. We don't do our own, we don't have a responsible person for gas in the business. We employ a separate consultancy to the people who do the work to check that the work's being done properly and that they're properly qualified to do that work and they're doing it in the right way. So you know, there's been a real focus in that, but the asbestos information will be on our core system, which means it will be accessible by anybody from the repairs team going into a building before they go in.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Thank you all for clearing that up. The one final thing I wanted to ask. When we had our last meeting, we were predicting that the stratified sample from the stock condition surveys would be available mid-February. Has that now been put back? If we're slightly behind on the stock condition surveys, when do we expect that stratified sample to come through?
I don't want to sound evasive on this, but we're in active conversations, even at the moment, with our contractor who's doing this work, and so so the answer is we're not satisfied with the progress. We want to find ways of improving that progress, but I don't want to set a date that either we've not agreed with the contractor, or say to you, for example, it might be end of April, and they're watching this thinking, good on you. Then we are not happy with it. We're working with a contractor to say, well, how can we up the rate? So it's not appropriate to be too clear about those conversations. Certainly mid-February is in doubt, but we haven't given up yet. I'm sorry, Chair, I hope that's acceptable.
I've actually got a question for you as well, if that's okay. So about damp and mould. Is it predictable which buildings are likely to have damp or mould because they're basement flats or because they're by a river or because the bathrooms are poorly ventilated and don't have windows? And if it is predictable which ones are likely to have recurrent problems with damp and mould, is there a way that we can get on the front foot on this and, you know, kind of deal with it or look for it before it happens or as it's happening?
The straight answer is yes, we can predict. And we can look at the characteristics of buildings where we found damp and mould, and we can actively engage with residents and check those properties. We're looking at doing that anyway. But I'll also say that there's a lot of comment in the press even yesterday about how AI can be used. This is one of the areas, and we're actually talking to a potential company that's experimenting with this, where you take the information on where we found damp or mould, they look at the characteristics and work through to predict. And so it's an area where there's great opportunity to improve the response across the industry because, I mean, years and years ago, and we've moved on from that, thankfully, I remember when I first came into the industry, people say, but responsive repairs, you can't predict them. You know, that's why you can't predict it. But as we know through the fire service, through the police service, and through our responsive repairs, you can predict it. It happens every year, every week in the same sort of patterns. And damp mould and condensation is entirely something that we need to get on the front foot so that we can reduce the risk all the time. And we're working on ways to do that. We're looking at the information we've got, and we may even try and bring in innovative tools to help us do that even better.
Williams.
Hi. Put my head back on properly. I noticed recently near to where I live, they were checking gutterings or clearing gutterings, and my next door neighbour's house, they noticed that one of the solar panels was loose. And they reporting that back, hopefully, as they said they were going to. But is that something that's now got to be on the checklist, so like with the properties that got solar panels, to make sure that they are actually fixed properly to the roofs?
Yes, it should. Whether it's done as part, it depends on the building. But what we also need to do is stock condition surveys on individual homes, and where they're on part of a block, we need to do a stock condition survey on the whole block, which looks at the whole block and looks at those aspects, you know, and to make sure that the building is still safe with externally, and if it's got solar panels, those are safe and properly secured. And also, you know, it looks at other aspects like balconies and things to make sure they're all safe with those buildings. So the straight answer is yes, but I can't be more specific on that property because, you know, if we don't know that, we still don't have a complete picture on the property.
Thank you, Paul. Are we all covered? We're all done on that point? Fantastic. Okay, so over to the next thing, which is the Consumer Standards Improvement Programme. Again, we'll take questions at the end, and I'd like to invite Louisa Foster, Head of Housing Improvement Programme, to present to the committee. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. So as part of the papers, I have provided you with a copy of the programme plan at the very highest level, which gives visibility of the progress through that plan for each project that's in flight, as well as a RAG status against that. I've provided you with a programme reporting summary of the projects that are live at the minute, and that detail is up until the start of December. And then we've got the overarching report, which describes the journey that we've been on to this point with the development of the programme. Just before I take questions, I'd just like to bring a couple of points to your attention, just to give you some assurance and reassurance that the programme plan that you're seeing is very high level, and behind that sits an awful lot of detail that is being managed on a daily basis by myself and the programme team. And then the programme plan to this point has been developed through a number of consultative exercises, some of which have been brought to this committee before, and I just wanted to run through those again. So we had the gap analysis work that was done to identify where there are gaps against the consumer standards and where we're not quite meeting them. That was then developed into an initial improvement plan where a large number of outcomes were identified that we needed to do to meet the consumer standards. We then commissioned a Pennington's report, who came in and looked at the gap analysis and provided further recommendations, specifically from a quality and safety perspective of where we needed to incorporate those recommendations. And what we've done with those, with the plan, is cross-reference across what we had already identified as gaps, and where we didn't have those covered, we've included those in the plan. And where I talk about the level of detail that sits behind the view that you have tonight, those Pennington's recommendations are cross-referenced and configured into the plan, so we can easily track where we are making progress against those recommendations specifically from Pennington's. We've also done a big prioritisation exercise on these projects to look at from a risk to the organisation, risk to the customer, and an opportunity where we have an opportunity to deliver quick wins, which has then fed into the overall schedule of when things need to happen, i.e. those exercises and outcomes that are higher risk to either the organisation or the customer, then we are scheduling earlier in the delivery of this programme. We've also done some early scoping sessions of a lot of the outcomes of this programme and have developed full scoping documents which set out what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, who's going to be involved, and again referring back to the Pennington's recommendations where that detail is setting out what we need to achieve. And finally, then we've done a big resource allocation exercise so that we know the people and the skills that we need to deliver what we're trying to deliver, and making sure that those resources are available. So all of those elements have been pulled together to create this programme plan, and it's resulted in 19 projects of varying sizes and complexity, and once they are delivered, then that will take us on our way to achieving compliance against the consumer standards. So I'm really happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I just wanted to make an observation. In my experience, you can have the best processes in the world and the best technical processes in the world, but if the human element goes wrong, it doesn't matter how good the process is, the process fails. So something I like about your report is actually you talk about the human risks. So how we could excel by people doing the right things, but how it could potentially go wrong if people got diverted on different priorities, for instance, or weren't fully engaged. So something for the committee, and I think that we can all add value on that, because we don't have to be technical experts, is to keep understanding those human elements and how they work. And if you could keep updating us on those, that would be fantastic. Any other kind of questions? Ian.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've just got one on the introduction, and then I've got a few on the risk assessment part, and then you'll have to forgive me showing my ignorance, but I couldn't make head or tail of the charts that were in the last appendix. So maybe if somebody could get them up on the screen and explain what they mean, because I was racking my brains. So in the introduction on page 4, it says, alternative options considered. A work stream approach to the programme plan has been considered and rejected. I remember when we were going through the transition, that was done via work streams. So I just wonder if you could just explain that. In terms of the risk assessment, RO13 rated as critical, a two-stage approach to building the plan. So becoming compliant and then trying to get to C1. So again, if you could just expand a little bit on that, that would be great. Just a comment really on RO20 on the next page. If we do not sufficient communication and awareness raising of the consumer standards, one of the things that has come to my attention very often is the biggest obstacle of getting tenants to engage with this kind of work, particularly the damp and mould and condensation programme, is that they've had a bad experience in the past and that they don't know that it is being improved, that a huge amount of work is being done. And so communicating the fact that this improvement programme is serious and resources are being put into it, and it's just not business as usual as it was before, could help drive engagement from tenants with this programme. And then plan to firm up reporting and system development resource to support cross-organisation requirements. That's RO RO35. I wonder if you could just, I mean, as I asked Paul with the asbestos, whether you could just update us on how the systems are coming along. And finally, RO58, rated as critical. There's currently no documented approach to the gathering of evidence. And I remember Gareth saying in our very first meeting that activity at this point is not a substitute for evidence, and that is a critical part of us achieving that compliance. And so could you reassure us on that this approach to documenting the evidence is moving forward, and that we will actually have the evidence we need to demonstrate to the regulator that we're compliant? And then, as I say, any assistance you can give me in understanding this graphic here would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Louise, are you okay with all those points? Yeah, quite a lot of them. Okay.
Thanks, Ian. Picking up on the alternative options around the way we have planned this programme. So, as you say, the transfer. Oh, I've gone blurry. The transfer was. That's fine. The transfer was managed in a workstream approach, and Claire, as SRO, and I have sat down and talked about this a few times, and we felt that a more traditional method of programme delivery was required for this because of the sheer scale of what needs to be achieved, and it is wide-reaching across the organisation. It does include, while it's specific to housing, there is quite a lot of support required from teams from within the council. So we decided that this was the most appropriate approach, predominantly down to the governance of a work stream approach. Is very meeting heavy. It's you need a work stream lead for each work stream, and they have to meet very regularly. So this more traditional method was felt to be the kind of the way to go. So that's why we've decided that option. In terms of the two-stage plan, so this was a discussion that we had at Programme Board around the recognising the committee, the Cabinet and the Programme Board's desire to be C1 an exemplar housing provider going forwards with the consumer standards. However, with the current position and the gap analysis that was done, the sheer amount of work required to get us to compliance, I felt, and this is why I recommended it as part of the initiation, was that we really needed to be laser focused using using the chair's kind of terminology at Programme Board, be laser focused on getting compliant and really focus on those safety elements. So that's where I believe that as part of when we're scoping some of this change, we need to really focus the organisation on that message, and we can all kind of dream the opportunity of being exemplar and being C1, but if we can't get to compliant first, and that's why breaking it down into the state in project and programme management, we refer to it as effectively like a stage gate. We get the opportunity as a programme board and as a committee, at the point at which we are compliant, we can then decide to go again to C1 if C1 is still appropriate at that time. So I just felt it gave us more control at that point, but without kind of losing the focus. So risk 20 on the risk log around raising awareness. This, I'm just going to pull it up if that's okay, just in front of me, just so I don't miss anything. This is predominantly captured in Project 1 in the programme around awareness raising, training, and making sure that everyone, especially in the housing section of the council, is fully aware of their obligations within the consumer standards. So it's something that isn't necessarily come up in a gap analysis or hasn't necessarily come from Pennington's, but it's something that we felt as a leadership team that we needed to bring forward. So we have got in development a communications strategy that we're working on to be able to communicate to housing colleagues, but also the wider council colleagues to raise awareness and show and demonstrate the importance of the consumer standards. And something that Caroline and I have spoken about is we want every standard to be everyone's responsibility. So not just I work in safety and I'm going to concentrate on safety. We want that to kind of, that ethos to be disseminated across the council. So we've got various ways that we want to do that through different communication channels. We've got the all-staff briefing. We're looking at what we put on the website that is available to external audiences as well. So it's a really, it's an important part of what we're doing rather than just changing processes. So, does that answer your question? RA30. I'm just going to jump down to RA58 if that's okay, so around gathering evidence. So where I just want to give reassurance around the evidence gathering and the messages that Gareth would have given previously. So this particular element that I've highlighted is we haven't necessarily started an evidence log. So our assumption is that when the regulator comes in to undertake that in-depth analysis, that if we had a bank of evidence that shows all the processes, process mapped, and where everything is, so that it could be really, a really easy process to say to the regulator, this is where everything is, and this is where you go to find it all. That's almost kind of our ultimate position. But that doesn't mean that we're not collecting evidence from a data perspective. So I think where that evidence conversation has come from previously is we can't evidence that we are doing the processes, and that's the bit that we're working in, and we are absolutely moving towards, where I've highlighted that we haven't collected evidence. It's more around the evidence bank and being able to point the regulator to where that is. So just to reassure you that evidence is being gathered from a data perspective. And then RA35, I'm just going to find it. So I think this, so this relates specifically to the availability of system and data resource. So there's a lot of requirement in this plan for reports, quite sophisticated data capture. We've obviously talked about the data that we're capturing through the stock condition surveys. We want to be able to take that from the surveys, put it in the system, and then see it in a way that we can then make data-led decisions. So there's a heavy, heavy requirement on that. And what I'm raising there is, if we don't have that resource in-house long term, then there is a risk that we would not be able to deliver on some of those reporting requirements. The same with data. There's specialist resources that we do have available to us at the minute, but they're not necessarily council employees. We are using external interims to do that. So it's not necessarily, so I'll put it as a high risk. I wouldn't say it's a significant or an urgent risk. It's just something to keep an eye on, that we make sure that we have those resources available to us for the duration of this programme. Was that everything? Oh, and the plan. Yes. Okay. And apologies. I tried to make it as simple as possible because, like I say, there is a lot of detail in this, and I'm happy to take anyone through it offline. I'm doing an in-depth session with the chair and Flo next week to look at this. But what you're seeing here is the 19 projects that I've talked about, and to the right you've got effectively a timeline. So from Q4 of 24 last year, so starting in September, October time, taking us through to Q2 of 2025, so March 2026, and the lines you can see in black with the kind of the black ends on them is the duration of that project. So if we look at, let's look at enhancing stock condition for resident wellbeing, because that's obviously topical that we're speaking about this evening. You can see that that project started in October 24, and the duration of it is now going through until September 2025. And the red bar you can see in that is the progress to date at the start of December with the delivery of that project. And the line that is the vertical line that is coming down through all of these is I say today's date, it's the date at which the plan was captured. So the view it should give you is the progress. In some of them, the progress is green, so it's on track, it's ahead of schedule, potentially if it's over the line. If it's behind the line, it's behind schedule. And the percentages at the end of the black lines is the overall percentage that we're through that individual project. Is that?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think I understand. I think it might be a good idea for me to join you and have it explained. The next page, what I'm similarly baffled by, which is the RAG status, because we seem to only have a few of the numbers, and we seem to be missing number 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 13, 14, 15, and 16. And I just wondered why that was. Because we've only got certain things showing, and I didn't quite understand why that was.
So that's purely because the projects that you've got in front of you in terms of the summary update are the projects that are live at the minute and where there is progress. So the one they've not been omitted for any reason other than the fact that we haven't started. Yeah. Okay.
I think there was a question from Bożena Tarnowska. No, Councillor.
To ask if you can tell more about this customer engagement, because on our meeting, leaseholders meeting, we express the need for to be more engaged in the process.
So there is a project in there around improving how we engage with our customers through customer engagement strategy. I believe that is due to come to committee at some point soon. So I can take it away and make it, because my colleague Ellen Pollicott is leading on that. So if you've got any specific concerns or want to raise anything in terms of involvement, then we could come back to you. Is that okay? Because I don't know the specific detail in terms of the process that's gone through to date. So is that okay, Caroline? Yeah. So we'll do that after, if that's okay.
Could I suggest that the whole customer engagement piece is so important. So it's really good that it's come up, and because you live in the properties, you're our eyes and our ears, you're there every day. So we keep a real focus on that. Flo.
Just a quickie. I'm not sure this is for you, though. I think it might be for Gareth. RO15 looks at the siloed approach that we've had in housing from our teams and the need to change that. What I'd like to know is how we are going to evaluate that change and whether it's going to be reported to this committee. So in other words, yes, we'll set things up, but how do we know that it's actually changed? How are we going to see that? How are we going to ensure that both we and tenants know that?
Gareth, are you happy to take that?
So I'm happy to work with you on the sort of measures that we want to choose. I think we've got some very real indicators that Paul alluded to around how we communicate between the sort of responsive repairs and how those relate to the sort of technical investment. So when a repair gets too big and it can't be completed by the responsive repairs team, we know that we need to improve our processes to make sure that handoff to a technical and investment team is smoother than it has historically been. So I think we've got some very, very credible measures around the satisfaction on how we turn that around. And I think that I'd be looking for other measures around what are our complaints telling us, what are the lessons that we learned in terms of those measures that we would bring back. So I think there's really critical areas when you, certainly in my experience, and I don't know, Claire, you want to comment. I think when you look at doing some of these complaint reviews, I think you can see some of the evidence of those examples of slight silos. And I suppose silos come in different forms. So there is a basic, sometimes lack of communication, but then I think sometimes a silo can take the form of lack of ownership and lack of seeing something through to completion. and it's not so much a silo as being sort of bounced between two silos. So I would be looking for a reduction in what we're seeing coming through that sort of complaints process and how we're resolving it. I think those are two key critical measures, but I also think that there are so many other ways in which we can look at our performance. So I think that, you know, I was having a conversation with Caroline's teams yesterday, and their eagerness to improve their own knowledge and engagement with their own patches and their own tenants and communities. I think that's as good a way as any of sort of getting an understanding, actually probably in advance of any performance statistic, about what's actually happening. And usually when I have worked, I've had the pleasure of working in operational services, actually the people on the ground doing the day job on a day-to-day basis are your very earliest warning sign that something isn't quite right. And so I think that part of what might not be captured in a specific performance measure, but one of the things that we need to kind of draw out is what are Caroline's teams in the community telling us as kind of early warnings, and how are we feeding that into our kind of management conversations? Because broadly, what I would like to see organisationally is that we feel like we are making smaller, earlier interventions than perhaps sometimes we do. And so, but I'm happy to work with you as a cabinet member on any other number of measures that you might want to suggest, but that's my sort of starter for 10.
The only thing I would say is we will get kicked out of the room at 8, I think. So we should be aware of that. But I don't want to truncate you, so please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say the experience we've had working with the community group is that the housing service have got a lot better at communicating with us. However, quite often they don't talk to each other. And we have ended up being the conduit through which one department has ended up talking to another. So I think that's something that's cropped up quite a few times. So I just thought I'd mention it because it pertains to what Flo was raised.
Councillor Pinniger.
I'm really pleased with this because it only started, I think we were discussing in September last year. October, we had a first report on it, and when this came through, I thought, what is this? Because it seems so developed. There's so much to it now. It took me a minute to think, oh, it's the, oh gosh, what's the name of the whole thing? But I wasn't going to say anything because IT is my thing. I'm a bit of a fanatic with computers and systems and cloud and all of that kind of thing. But when you talk about silos not working together, you have adopted Microsoft 365 in the last 2 years or so. And as none of these programs mention the sort of the integration of all those productivity tools, because that's what they are. They raise your productivity. So I just wondered if there is sort of a parallel strand to get the best benefit from those tools.
Yes, absolutely. So I think, Paul referenced, our housing systems and improving the information that's on QL. So we fundamentally have a good understanding at our fingertips of both of our homes and our families and people living in them. So I think that helps to allow systems to support our workforce. We're also looking at the kind of broader IT integration of the CBC and the previous CBH systems this year. So that again will offer those enhancements. We chose purposely not to go for that integration early, mainly because we wanted to just safeguard and do a bit more due diligence and safeguard the critical housing systems, so we didn't sort of disturb them and try and do something where suddenly everyone would be shouting, saying, I've lost access to QL and all those things. The one thing that I would say, though, which is I entirely agree with you, Chair, is one of the things that we need to ensure is you can have the best software system, process, IT program in the world, but it is of no use if the culture of the organisation doesn't fully adopt it. And so what we need to ensure is that there is a full buy-in right across the organisation, CBC as a whole, so that we get the very best possible outcomes and support and information from these systems that's credible and accurate, and that we don't get a situation where we're taking decisions based on a kind of a rubbish in, rubbish out principle, because that's where systems they don't help you. And I have, not here, but I have historically worked in local authorities where there is a fantastic system, but it's not been adopted, and people revert back to their own Excel spreadsheet and they say, well, you know, this came in 2 years ago, but I've never bothered with it. I stick with my Word document, actually. And I think that, you know, there are pockets where, you know, we need to be prepared that we might find that as we roll through that kind of further integration process. So that's why I just think it comes with that sort of caveat that I entirely agree with your point, Chair, on people and culture.
I was speaking specifically, I suppose, so I didn't say about the collaboration tools more than the documents and the spreadsheets, because there's a tremendous amount of new collaboration tools. We were just talking about silos and people not working together. So.
Thank you. Could I suggest, because I don't want us to get squeezed on the last agenda item, so we end up doing them in 2 minutes, you know, because we've gone too long on everything else. So next thing is the draft HRA budgets and performance targets for the 2025 to 2026 financial year. Just a little bit of background on that. This report sets out the interim housing revenue account, the HRA budget proposals for 25/26 for consultation, and the revised forecast. So, you know, these budgets get revised every quarter, is that correct? For 2024-25. This report has already been presented to Cabinet on the 17th of December 24. Could I invite Gemma Bell, who's our Director of Finance and Assets, to present to the committee, please?
Thanks, Chair. So as Julian's outlined, this is the current budget position or forecast budget position and proposal for next year's budget for the housing revenue account. So that's everything to do with our housing delivery, so everything from dwelling rents all the way through to repairs and maintenance. So the draft position for, or the draft forecast position for the current year that we're in reflects the financial information we had in mid-November. It follows on, I think, the previous committee where we discussed the Q2 monitor. So it's just an updated forecast based on the current year. You'll see we're still experiencing pressures on void turnaround, and that's impacting some of our dwelling rental income and the cost of borrowing for the capital programme for the year. So as Julian said, the paper also includes the proposed budget for the following year that starts on the 1st of April. So this has been produced in parallel with the general fund budget. So there's lots of different costs and recharges that flow between the two, both of which are out to public consultation until the 31st of January. So once the consultation period is closed, we'll then feed back all of the comments that we've had into a final budget proposal, and that will come to full council for approval in February. And then specifically for the HRA, what we'll do is use that budget information to populate the 30-year business model for the HRA, which looks at the long-term sustainability of the proposals and the investments that we're planning to make. So I welcome any questions. I know we've had some outside of this forum as well, or of course sent separately, and we'll make sure that they're all included in the consultation response.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? I think Richard was first, then here.
So these are specific to the numbers. So I wanted to know whether the the effects on the HRA of the changes to right to buy are becoming clearer now, and whether that was reflected in the forecast for capital receipts of 2.2 million, or whether that's going to change. I think it is, because this was set, like you say, on the 17th of December, so that's probably going to change. So maybe you could let me know, or suggest which way it might change. The document mentions a reduction of 111k in dwelling rents. Is that due to the increase in voids that we've been experiencing? In terms of income from services, I noticed there was a decrease of 271,000. Did we lose some contracts that we previously were fulfilling? And then property improvements and major repairs, there was 2.6 million less spent on property improvements. Is that due to delays of procurement? And if it is, does that mean we've negotiated a better deal or secured a better quality supplier?
Gemma.
No, that's absolutely fine. So I can take each of those four in turn. So in terms of the impact on the right to buy, the changes in right to buy, at the moment it's too early to understand. I think what the impacts of that change in policy will be in the longer term. So the change came in on the 21st of November. We had a significantly increased number of applications before that date, where because post the 21st of November, the right to buy discount is reducing to £30,000. So we saw a huge increase in activity. Those are still, many of those are still obviously going through the process. What we have not had time to see then is after that spike, what that means in the longer term, in terms of right to buy applications, meaning that stock is dropping out of the HRA. What it does mean, though, on the flexibility of what we can do with the capital receipts that we receive, is the government is currently consulting, and actually the deadline for the consultation was today, on that changes to the legislation, which include being able to combine right to buy receipts with different capital grants, so we can really maximise and there be full flexibility with how we use those right to buy receipts, whereas at the moment we are limited with simply replacing the stock that we've lost through the right to buys. So hopefully what that means is there'll be more flexibility for funding of sort of additionality of stock. Dwelling rents, yes, that's correct. As of the middle of November, when this data was taken, I think voids have increased since then, so there'll be revised figures obviously reflected in the final budget proposals that go to February, because we can take that data up to the end of January. Income from services, I think that 271k that you've referenced there, I think that's the net impact of all of the variances across all of the different areas of the budget, both income and expenditure. So I can take that away and provide a more detailed breakdown of that 271, but that's the net across the whole HRA. And then I think the final question was on property improvements and major repairs. Yes, so that forecast has shifted because there's been delays in procurement. So again, we are reprofiling that capital, that 4-year capital spend at the moment to go into the final budget proposal. But of course, that'll also be driven by the data that's coming out of the stock condition survey as well. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Oh, hi, Gemma. Thank you. So couple of things on the introduction, and then I've just got a couple of questions about the accounts themselves. The provisional local government finance settlement for 2025-26 is not giving you a guarantee that the increased cost of employers' national insurance contributions for housing staff is going to be covered. I wondered, if it is not covered, what is the cost implication to the HRA? And under point 5.7, we've identified a number of areas where additional investment is needed to ensure the council are compliant. These have been reported separately to the council's housing committee and progress will be monitored. I don't think I've had that. And I asked Rianne earlier, and I don't think anybody else has had it either. So I wonder if we could possibly see that, or whether it's online and I haven't got it in my papers. I don't know. And then just on the net operating surplus and the revenue reserves, I was quite startled when we looked at the net operating surplus. Originally was going to be 355,000 and is now forecast to be just 70,000, and then 65,000 for the next financial year. I mean, excuse me going into the vernacular, but it looks a bit like squeaky bum time. And in terms of the revenue reserve, that has fallen from 1.5 million down to 1,006,000. And then looking at the projections, it appears to be increasing each year. In terms of the 30-year modelling that you mentioned, when do you predict then that we will get back to our target of 1.5 million in the reserve?
Ian, thank you. Good questions. Jenna.
Thanks, Ian. I think I've got 3 of those 4 questions. So in terms of the provisional finance settlement, we are not assuming, like it says in the report, we're not assuming that we'll be reimbursed at all for any of the increased national insurance contributions that we're required. Yeah, that's already in those figures. I can confirm this number offline, but it's around about 200,000 for the current. Yeah, that was yeah. So I think that was I missed question 2. I'm sorry.
This was to do with the areas where additional investment is needed. Sorry. Oh, thank you. Yeah, this is I'm no good with technology. Sorry. The areas where additional investment is needed to ensure that the council as compliant have been reported separately to this committee, but I don't think I've actually had that. And there's some question about whether anybody else on this committee has had it either. So I just wanted to check.
Do you have is that in the main, sorry, is that in the main body?
Gareth is happy to pick that up.
That is just the improvement plan in terms of setting out that you've had. It's just slightly separate terminology. So in terms of it being reported to the committee.
So then I think your third question was around the net operational surplus and the revenue reserves. So you are correct that the forecast operational surplus is expected to be much lower than in previous years. I guess we've already touched on the increased national insurance contributions, and we're still forecasting that next year we'll have an average borrowing cost of 4.35%. So obviously both of those within the expenditure side of the HRA budget are higher than the CPI +1 that we're able to uplift dwelling rents by. So we are seeing a suppressed operational surplus over the years that are forecast here. I think probably just to mention on the HRA balance, and you referred quite correctly that historically, the target for that HRA balance has been 1.5 million. And I guess, and again, we are down on that. But what we also have in taking that decision to bring Cheltenham Borough Homes back in-house is that there is also a Cheltenham Borough Homes reserve separate to that. So we're able to access that, and at any point that we do get to a point where we wind that company up, that balance would just transfer into the HRA anyway. So there is additional reserves available within those housing operations. The 30-year modelling, I think I'll have to take that one away. So we're hoping to confirm the final numbers in about 2 weeks' time, I think, to put into that 30-year model. So then we'll be taking the relevant leadership team, chairs, etc., through what that looks like for the HRA. And the model doesn't just track our balances and reserves. It tracks things like interest cover. It tracks our borrowing. Lots of different measures, about 15 different financial measures that help us assess the health of the HRA over the long term. So I will look forward to briefing people on that.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, I think next agenda item then, which is the update from the tenant and leaseholder panels. Just a reminder of the objective on that. So it's to highlight the ongoing activities of the tenant and leaseholder panels and provide an additional opportunity for tenant and leaseholder voices to be heard. And that is critical, and we've already talked about that, and we'd like to build that on that. So I would like to ask Agnieszka Wisniewska, is that correct? Tenant representative, and Bożena Tarnawska, is that correct? Leaseholder representative, to talk to the committee.
I have no update at this time, but I think Ian wanted to say something.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to mention something which I think is really important for tenants, which I got through my letterbox a couple of weeks back, which is what was the old Cheltenham Borough Homes News, which has now been cannily rebranded as Tenant Voice. I just wanted to say, in this age where we think everything ought to be online and everybody is going onto the internet to find everything out, how important this is and how widely read it is. I could be slightly mischievous here and say, councillors, that unlike your election literature, people really look forward to reading CBH News, and there is a lot in it and a lot of people read it, and it's a very effective way of communicating to all our residents, and I just wanted to say well done for keeping it. The other thing that struck me very much was that on the front page it was highlighting the work of the Skills Hub in Hester's Way, and myself, Councillor Pinniger, and our new Housing Director Caroline Walker were all at the launch of this and have followed it through very, very tough times when it was difficult to get people through the door. Now, every time I go into that building, it's packed. And I could tell you stories of tenants who have had really bad experience in the past, who are now in work and looking for full-time jobs just because of the work of the Skills Hub. And I cannot say enough nice things about it. I wanted to flag up to members that the funding for the Skills Hub runs out in July, and I believe it was originally from the Levelling Up Fund from the previous government, which no longer exists. So I hope that we are looking at how this excellent project can continue, because it is doing brilliant work for a lot of tenants, and it's one of those things that makes Cheltenham an exemplar, as you have described, that we do this kind of work with our tenants. So long may it continue. Thank you.
Ian, thank you. That was really valuable. The Skills Hub, who would be the biggest expert on the Skills Hub and how that's funded and so on?
We'll take it away.
Yeah, we'll take that away on the funding with Matt, I think.
I'm glad you brought it up, thank you, because it was inspirational actually, so thank you.
I think brilliant. Thank you very much, Ian. And can I suggest that perhaps, Chair of the committee, I'm happy to meet with you and with officers to see how we take this forward, how we find the cash to make sure that this continues, because we need people in Cheltenham who actually have skills that we can utilise. So I'm happy to do that if you are, Chair.
I'm very happy to do that, thank you. Sorry, could I just make one point? I don't want to put you on the spot, Agnieszka, but is there a way that we can work with your tenants better and communicate more that you can think of? Because, you know, I'm just conscious that that's really important and you're the representative there, so.
So when we need more communication, Ellen Palicot usually invite people to our meetings, and we work in that way. And then we provide the scrutiny on subjects.
You feel that's working?
Yeah.
Good, that's good to hear. I just wanted to ask that question. Richard?
Just to round off the previous conversation, I believe the money for the Skills Hub was County Council.
Yes, it was.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because as a representative of leaseholders, I don't have any updates because we will have meeting on 21st of January. But I would like to add to what was said before, because to improve social interaction in our neighborhood, I was thinking about maybe English lesson will be available, or council can organize something like that, because there is lots of foreigners, and especially ladies from countries like Syria. They don't speak English, and they talk to them, and they express interest in if there will be any lessons, they will be happy to attend.
Flo?
Thank you for raising that, because one of the issues many of our schools are facing is that children are coming to school who do not speak any English. Their mums don't speak English, their dads speak some English, but we have children of 8 years old translating for older children because there just isn't anything coming through from the county to help in that regard in the sort of numbers that are needed. So I welcome what you've just said, and perhaps we can chat about that at some point and see what we might be able to help using some of the community organisations that we have in Cheltenham.
No, I would welcome that, and thank you for bringing it up. Actually, as an ex-Londoner, I should say, you know, Tower Hamlets, Paul, you know, has many kids whose parents speak English as a second language, and the educational results are excellent, excellent. You know, so it can work really well, and we should learn from that. So, sure, of course.
I just wanted to add, because these women, they are very separated from life, because they can't communicate. They only can go for shopping if the husband take them, and also outside or going even talk to neighbors. They are unable to do this. So I feel sorry for them.
Zena, these are really good points, and Flo cares about this, I care about this, we all care about this, and we will take this away. I'm not sure if it strictly fits in housing, though, but as councillors, we will find out where it does fit and come back to you.
We do have a training within housing, though, so it might be something that they can pick up.
Brilliant, brilliant. Did you catch that? There is a training team within housing, so potentially it could be picked up by that. But, you know, we'll navigate things to find where this best sits. So, Ian.
One thing that occurs to me, I think the idea that you float is an excellent one. There is potentially a way of approaching it from the other direction, in that maybe we need more people employed by the council who actually speak those languages. So maybe people who speak Romanian, Polish, and the other languages that we have within our cohort of tenants. Maybe it's worth looking at having some more people in the business that actually can communicate directly. Just a thought.
Ian, good thought. And I just wrote you next. One suggestion I would make is we may have people who speak those languages working with us already, and we may not know. So perhaps the first information gathering thing is to do an audit of what languages we have within the organisation. Rowan?
Thought it might just be helpful because we do actually have a number of organisations across within Cheltenham that actually do assist with languages and that level of communication, not least some of the community centres for particular groups, but also I know the Isbourne Foundation, for example, and the County Council pay towards that is for that type of integration, if you like, and that's to learn the language. So there is, you know, I don't think it's actually, personally, don't think it's just this authority's responsibility. It's far bigger than us, and our small budgets, if we're really honest, won't cover that. But actually, one of the strengths of this council is that we work in partnerships. So, you know, looking towards what's already existing within our town and our communities and tapping into that, and actually then being able to communicate to you and your colleagues or your neighbours would be probably the best way and the most easily achievable, I think, without raising expectations. I just thought that was useful.
That was really useful. But it is key to community engagement, isn't it? And stakeholder engagement. So, yeah, it may be outside the normal kind of parameters of this committee, but we'll try and navigate this for you. Thank you. So, are we all done on that point? So the next thing, and we've got 15 minutes before we're kicked out. So is the review of the Housing Committee forward plan. Has anyone got any comments on that? Is there anything when you looked at the forward plan where you thought, oh, goodness, we really should be covering that topic and we're not covering it?
Just on the plan for February, I think we agreed it after this was probably published, but you will get an update on right to buys as well, and the current position where we are with the sort of spike in terms of the number of applications that came forward and what the potential impacts of that might be. So that will come forward in February.
Excellent. So forward plan, I'm kind of taking that everyone's happy, really. Yeah. Okay. The nods are saying that. Items to be referred to Cabinet, point 10, no items have been referred to Cabinet. Then the briefing note on the housing sector insight. Now, Gareth has already added to that at the beginning of the meeting. And we are in a state of flux at the moment, aren't we, to say the least? And when I read it, you know, I was immediately going, what does this mean for Cheltenham? What does this mean for Cheltenham? And that's not clear yet, really. But I did feel better educated and better informed because of it. But any comments or?
Thing to give an update on where we are at each meeting.
Brilliant. So you may not have caught that, but Gareth said he's happy to give an update because things are changing so quickly. He's happy to give an update at each meeting, which sounds very useful to me. So we're almost at the end. Date of next meeting is the Wednesday, the 19th of February, so 6 p.m. So hopefully see you here.